This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Guerin. Brought to you in part by
TheStreet.com. Up-to-the-minute stock market news and in-depth analysis. Our quant ratings service provides objective, independent ratings daily on over 4,300 stocks. Learn more at TheStreet.com/NBR.
Turning up the heat as temperatures drop, demand for natural gas hits a record, and that could mean higher costs to heat your home.
It's official. J.P. Morgan gets hit with a $1.7 billion fine, but will the penalty change banker behavior?
Regaining its fizz, why the bulls are piling into shares of Coke after a flat performance last year. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Tuesday, January 7th.
Good evening, everyone. Bitter cold temperatures across the country in all 50 states, even Hawaii, forced millions of Americans into hibernation today. Freezing temperatures with below-zero wind chills shut down many companies, stopped trains, grounded planes, and caused power outages for thousands of homes and businesses. Now, weather experts say the dramatic drop in temperatures today, as much as 50 degrees below zero in some sections of the Midwest, may be the coldest day in the U.S. in almost 20 years. It's a phenomenon they call the polar vortex. But one beneficiary of this deep freeze, natural gas. For the second day in a row, demand hit a record, but prices pulled back late today on hopes the cold snap will soon end. Jackie DeAngelis has more.
Yeah, it's cold outside. Teeth are chattering from the plains through the upper Midwest and all the way to the East Coast.
Wind chills, though, are negative 20 or so.
New York City hit a record low of 4 degrees, and even Atlanta was feeling the sting of single-digit temperatures. All anyone wants to know is, when will it warm up?
The question on everybody's mind is this just a very limited event?
To cope with the falling temperatures, most of us are turning up the heat and wondering what the next fuel bill might look like.
I am worried about this weather having an impact on my heating bills because it is cranked up all the way.
I have an absolute concern about the weather having an impact on my heating bills. It's already high because I have, young children who don't know the difference between heat and cost.
It'll make heating more expensive and the cost of fuel more expensive because of usage.
Fuel costs have run up since the beginning of November. Natural gas, which heats most U.S. homes, is up more than 20%. And today's chill sent demand to record highs, up 30% from a day earlier. Heating oil, also more expensive, up about 2% in 2 months. But the weather may take a turn for the better.
A lot of the cold that we had early this week, by this weekend and early next week, it's a distant memory. We're talking about 15 to 25 degrees above normal for most of the consuming region from the Midwest to the East Coast.
So now the question becomes, what happens to gas prices if the weather does warm up? We've certainly noticed how quickly gas prices rise when oil prices spike. We've also noticed that they seem to decline a little bit less quickly when oil prices drop.
Today, it seems traders hearing the forecast for warmer temperatures in the weeks ahead were thinking about taking some profits from the run-up in natural gas prices.
This morning, buying that gas to me seemed like a tantamount to going to buy a snowblower in the middle of a blizzard. It just seemed like the timing is wrong.
I would have expected gas to be at $5 already, and it's not. So I wonder if selling pressure is coming.
But even if the raw material costs begin to come down, consumers have to wonder how quickly it will translate into savings at home. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Jackie DeAngelis.
And joining us now to talk more about how this extreme weather is affecting businesses nationwide is Scott Bernhardt. He's president of Planalytics, a firm that tracks weather for businesses. Mr. Bernhardt, welcome. Good to have you with us. Do you have any estimates about the overall economic impact, plus or minus, of this weather we've been having? And how does it, as a weather incident, compare with others of recent memory, whether it's a hurricane or a superstorm or a tornado?
Well, sure, and thank that. This is certainly a significant event, as Jackie just mentioning. It's the entire East Coast, all the way back through the Midwest, all the way back to the Rockies, all 50 states showing freezing temperatures. This is a significant weather event. We haven't seen anything this big from a weather perspective since Sandy.
So,
I mean, it is that big. It's not quite that big, but it's certainly it's a significant event affecting, over conservative estimates are 150 million people.
And to follow up on what Tyler was asking you, do you have a number to put on the cost, the economic impact of this, and how much longer do you think this cold snap is going to last?
Well, that's two sides to that. Yes, I mean certainly the estimates are at $5 billion and rising. This event is not over yet. We're still calculating the numbers. We're still right into it. If you walk outside right now in New York City, you'll be reminded it's still cold out there. So this event is still happening, still going on. Estimates are passing $5 billion. There's essentially what happens is it's a slowdown. Things stop moving. Airlines stop being able to operate efficiently. Schools are closed in Chicago. People that can be left home are staying home. People essentially are not going outside, and that's a cost.
There are obvious beneficiaries, I would think. The snow melt makers, the shovel makers, and so on and so forth. They would be beneficiaries. Maybe the Home Depots that sell those kinds of goods would win. Are there other unexpected pockets where companies or businesses benefit that I might not think of?
Well, certainly. And then again, usually when I mention them, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. But things like convenience stores are always good. People want, if they have to go out, they want to go out as quickly and as conveniently as possible. Restaurants that deliver, anything online shopping goes way up. People essentially cocoon. They do their best not to go outside, but they still want to be entertained. They'll do video on demand, online shopping, things of that are all get a significant spike when people cocoon, when they stay indoors, right? Stay warm in that stay out of the cold.
Most people can deal with this kind of a situation. They know it's, a few days and then it's going to go back. But in terms of looking at this in the bigger picture, it's been 20 years since there's been an event like this in terms of cold weather. We go through this, is that pretty much it? Or, could this kind of cold weather keep coming back? Is this a change in weather patterns?
No, not really. I mean, depending on your question, certainly winter isn't over yet. There's still plenty of weather out there still to be had. It's beginning of January. There's still plenty of opportunity for this. That said, this is a significant cold. Unlike anything, as you said, in 20 years. This is very unlikely to repeat, but that's not to say we're not going to see some significant weather before spring.
Very quickly, birdseed sales rise?
That's correct. People are trying to do their best to help Mother Nature out a little bit, and that's some of the storm prep. They run to the grocery store, but they buy the birdseed.
All right, Scott Bernhardt, president of Planalytics. Thanks very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Well, despite that record-breaking cold weather making its way as far south as the Sunshine State, Citrus Growers Association in Florida had some good news today. The overnight temperatures hitting the heart of Florida's citrus-growing region stayed just above the freezing mark and will not stay around long enough, leaving orange, grapefruit, and other crops unharmed.
Good news in the markets, too, which saw the welcome return of some sizable gains today on positive economic reports. The nation's trade deficit fell to the lowest level in 4 years in November as U.S. exports hit a record high on strong overseas demand for U.S.-made autos, aircraft, and heavy equipment. Also helping, increased domestic energy production meant less demand for imported oil. With that, stocks rallied. The Dow today gained 105 points. The Nasdaq was 39 points higher, and the S&P 500 added 11.
One day after Janet Yellen was confirmed as the next chairwoman of the Federal Reserve, one of her colleagues issued a warning about the costs of the slow economic recovery. Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren says the economy is still far from where it needs to be, especially regarding the jobless rate and inflation targets. He says there's plenty of evidence to justify the Fed keeping its stimulus plans in place.
An update on a story we reported here last night. J.P. Morgan Chase is taking responsibility and agreeing to pay a settlement of $1.7 billion to victims of Bernie Madoff's massive Ponzi scheme for turning a blind eye to what the Justice Department says were obvious signs of money laundering, among other things. The bank will pay another $350 million to federal banking officials to settle civil charges. U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara of New York City, the lead prosecutor in the case, says the bank failed miserably, in his words, to head off Wall Street's biggest ever swindle, even as the bank, exited Madoff-related positions that put its own capital at risk.
J.P. Morgan never filed a single suspicious activity report in the United States and never raised a concern to the bank's anti-money laundering department in the U.S. In other words, the bank connected the dots when it mattered to its own profit, but was not so diligent when it came to its legal obligations.
No individuals at the bank were charged with any wrongdoing, but the bank itself faces 2 felony criminal counts for violating the Bank Secrecy Act. Those charges are deferred for now and will be lifted in 2 years pending the payments and reforms of J.P. Morgan's anti-money laundering practices.
With today's settlement, the grand total of fines that J.P. Morgan has paid is about $20 billion. But investors don't seem to mind. The bank's stock has soared in the past year, rising almost 30%. So do these big fines really matter? We turn to John Coffey for some answers. He's professor of securities law at Columbia University. You know, Jack, it's not just J.P. Morgan we're talking about here. There's sort of a pattern. And whether it's another financial institution, another bank, they get the fines, their stocks still go up. So it makes you wonder, do these fines really change anything?
Well, I'm afraid they are not the optimal means of deterrence. When you impose a fine on a large public corporation, you're really imposing it on the shareholders. And the shareholders of J.P. Morgan are very numerous, very dispersed, very diffused, and they can't take collective action. Now, if J.P. Morgan had a controlling shareholder, $20 billion in fines would clearly motivate a response. But if you've got millions of shareholders who can't take collective action, management remains in control and aren't being measurably affected by shareholder dissatisfaction. Thus, I think the fine strategy has to be seen as second best. Not ineffective, but second best. What would really work is being able to focus the penalties more on individuals, either individually or collectively.
So why, John, don't prosecutors or regulators at the SEC go after individuals? I assume it's because individuals fight the charges because either their career or their freedom is at risk. Obviously, you can't have bad behavior without individuals committing it.
I agree with you fully, but let me give you the 3 basic reasons why it's very hard to prosecute individuals. American criminal law insists on proof of willfulness, not simply that you were negligent or you should have known better, but that you willfully aided and abetted the fraud or sought to cause it. That's a very high standard because we don't want to send people to prison very easily. That's reason 1. Reason 2, if you look at our large corporations, the organizational structure there is extremely decentralized, and it is hard to hold people at the top liable for decisions that were made echelons below at operational levels, which aren't really monitored by management. And that's what's different in these bank cases from, say, Enron and WorldCom. There we were dealing with decisions that were cook-the-book decisions made by senior management. Here, when we deal with mortgage securitizations, that's going on down at the level of majors and captains, and you can't say the general knew all about that. And finally, and the worst reason, enforcers and regulators would rather settle than fight because they're risk-averse, and it's easier to get a settlement from the entity, which will almost always settle, than fight the government. But the condition for that settlement may sometimes be that you don't go after the individuals, and that's the bargain that I'm afraid is sometimes there.
All right, so understand those circumstances. Do you think that there is going to be any change in corporate cultures, corporate behavior, and even individual behavior, given all of these fines that we're seeing in settlements everywhere?
Oh, some change. Remember that what's probably most effective here is that senior management at a company like J.P. Morgan has been very embarrassed. And that embarrassment is a form of deterrence, and they are probably going to insist on more compliance. Our problem is always that compliance works well during a stormy period. But once you get back into a bubbly market, the compliance officer gets a good deal less respect. So I think there are changes. I think the government is definitely getting tougher, and I think management has been embarrassed. But I don't think shareholders can enforce tougher law compliance on management.
Okay. All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much. John Coffey, law professor at Columbia University, with us tonight.
Well, the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York City had a doubly busy day today. Jury selection began in the insider trading trial of Matthew Martoma, a one-time portfolio manager at Stephen A. Cohen's hedge fund, SAC Capital. Martoma is one of 8 current or former SAC employees facing criminal charges for using proprietary information from clinical drug trials to trade millions of dollars worth of pharmaceutical shares. Prosecutors in New York City call it the most lucrative insider trading scheme in U.S. history.
More fraud allegations involving civil servants. More than 100 current and former New York City workers, including dozens of policemen and firefighters, have been charged with faking psychiatric problems in order to get Social Security disability benefits. Officials say the scam dates back more than 2 decades for some of those taken into custody today.
Still ahead, legislation to renew jobless benefits clears a Senate hurdle. But what are the odds a real deal gets done? Ford's CEO Alan Mulally, the subject of numerous reports that he was leaving to run Microsoft, will stay at the automaker at least through the end of this year. In an interview with the Associated Press, Mulally said he wanted to end all of that Microsoft speculation.
The Federal Trade Commission is throwing its weight around today, cracking down on bogus claims from companies pushing weight loss products. The agency is fining 4 companies for using deceptive advertising to sell dubious diet aids. A company called Sensa has to repay $26 million to consumers after claiming that sprinkling a powder on food will make the pounds go away. Other targets include skin cream maker L'Occitane, supplement maker Lean Spa, and HCG Diet Direct. It sells hormones that it promises will kickstart weight loss.
We begin tonight's market focus with an upgrade and a downgrade in the healthcare sector. Deutsche Bank raising its rating on United Health to buy from hold, citing the company's improving margin risk profile and conservative exposure to those new healthcare exchanges. Deutsche Bank also cutting Humana's rating to sell from hold because of what it says are above-average risks facing the company. Shares of United Health up 3%, 76.51, making it today's best-performing Dow component. Humana, meanwhile, fell slightly to $100.55. Eli Lilly issuing a weak earnings outlook. The drug maker expects a slump in both profits and revenue this year, but that forecast is still in line with estimates. Lilly said the loss of drug patents are to blame. Shares were down there slightly, ending at $51.19. Pharmacyclics shares surged today after positive news for a drug it developed with Johnson & Johnson. A late-stage trial of the company's leukemia treatment was stopped early because the therapy met study goals. The stock climbed almost 20% today to $125.90. J&J shares also higher by 2% to $94.29.
Netflix fell today after Morgan Stanley downgraded its shares. The video streaming service was the top-performing stock in the S&P last year, but Morgan Stanley cut its rating to underweight from equal weight because of increasing competition from its rivals like Hulu, HBO Go, and Amazon Prime Instant Video. Shares tumbled 5.5% to $339.50. Michael Kors also took a hit after its rating was slashed by Citi. The firm downgraded the luxury goods maker to neutral from buy. The analyst cited the company's high stock price and concerns about slower sales for accessories. The stock dropped nearly 4% to $78.94. And Sonic said its quarterly profits surged 34%, and that's thanks to solid sales growth and lower costs. The drive-in restaurant chain also said it's looking to expand to competitive markets in the Northeast and California. Shares popped more than 4.5% to $20.15.
And shares of Coca-Cola ended a little bit higher today, something a lot of analysts predict we will see a lot more often in 2014. After years of declining soda sales here in the U.S., the company has focused on emerging markets and new products and has seen shares regain a lot of their fizz. Sarah Eisen has more.
Coke was not a star in 2013, lagging most of its Dow peers with a paltry return of 12%. Arch rival Pepsi managed to return 21% for the year. Will 2014 be better for Coke? Some analysts say yes. While the company blames recent troubles on everything from economic slowdowns to bad weather, it's the international story that has most analysts excited about its future. Most of Coke's sales come from outside the United States, and the global economy seems to be on the upswing. According to Jonathan Freeney of Janney Montgomery Scott, 700 million people will join the global middle class by 2020, and that will cause sparkling beverage volume to double in the next 10 to 15 years.
if what's happened in the past happens in the future with carbonated soft drink consumption hand in hand with economic growth, and a lot of these hot places where people would love to have a cold Coke with more spending money, this will be a great stock and a great growth opportunity almost regardless of what happens in developed markets.
A boost could come sooner in Brazil, where Coke is the lead sponsor of this year's World Cup. And if history is any guide, results from the tournaments in South Africa and Germany show those marketing dollars actually translated into higher sales. The real sweetener for investors, though, may come from new drinks with natural flavors and lower calories. It's been 6 years since the launch of Coke Zero, and innovation is something the industry has been working on. To be sure, there are real concerns. The threat of soda regulation, uncertainty about the global economy, and the prospect of a stronger U.S. dollar all pose a risk to Coca-Cola. But that isn't stopping many from betting that in 2014, you can't beat the real thing. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Sarah Eisen.
Lawmakers took a big step in the fight to reinstate jobless benefits cut off to more than 1 million long-term unemployed Americans 2 weeks ago. One big hurdle was cleared today after the Senate, including 6 Republicans, siding with Democrats, voted to limit debate on the bill to renew those benefits. A final vote is still pending. At the White House, President Obama, fresh off a 2-week vacation in Hawaii, pleaded with lawmakers to pass the bill and rejected arguments that unemployment benefits lessen the motivation to find a job.
The long-term unemployed are not lazy. They're not lacking in motivation. They're coping with the aftermath of the worst economic crisis in generations.
John Harwood joins us now from Washington. John, what are the odds that this bill passes the Senate? What's next?
I still think they're not great, Tyler. This is one hurdle cleared, but there's big other hurdles to clear, both in the Senate as well as the House. Republicans, even some of those who voted for cloture today to move the bill along, are insisting on paying for the extension of unemployment benefits. That's $6 billion if we're talking for 3 months, $25 billion if we're talking for a year, and it's not easy for the two sides to agree on how to do that. We could remain in a stalemate long term throughout this election year.
And still, John, this was a surprise, wasn't it? The way the vote turned out?
It was. There had been a lot of talk about the fact that Republicans had dug in. Democrats would not be able to get the votes they needed to end this filibuster. What we don't know yet is whether that reflects a long-term erosion in the Republican position and they're going to come to Democrats and extend, or whether they were simply falling back to a different line of defense and didn't want to appear like they weren't willing to talk about it, debate it on the floor.
The Senate is one thing, the House is another. What might happen there?
Well, the House is saying that this is going nowhere unless President Obama steps up with what they call a serious plan to pay for this and include some incentives for jobs. Some of the things that Republicans have proposed to go along with this, though, like delaying the individual mandate on Obamacare, are clearly non-starters. Other things include things like the Keystone Pipeline, which the administration hasn't taken a position on yet.
Okay, a lot of nuances in this debate. Thanks so a lot, John. John Harwood reporting from Washington. And coming up on the program, from wearable technology to gadgets in cars, what the major tech players are betting will be the next big thing. In Las Vegas today, it was the kickoff of the annual Consumer Electronics Show. It's where technology and media companies show off their latest must-have devices. So what are the big trends, and what hot new gadgets will we all be seeing and even buying later this year? John Fort takes a look.
Smartphone lenses, watches, appliances. This is the Consumer Electronics Show, where the world's biggest tech brands and quite a few upstarts come to court retailers and cut deals. Practically everyone's already got a smartphone and a flat screen TV. And now the companies that won on your wall and in your pocket want to take over your car and the rest of your mobile life. Wearable technology has tons of buzz this year with smartwatches and activity trackers.
Just like there are lots of watches right now, there's going to be a gamut from really functional, almost phone-like things that you wear to really small, light, fitness-related things like a Jawbone Up or a Fitbit or something like that.
In the car, Google is teaming up with Audi, GM, and others to put the Android operating system on the road. AT&T and OnStar are making cars into Wi-Fi access points.
We're really excited about the new growth businesses that we're getting into, like the connected car, digital life.
And there's a lot of fun stuff. This $70 Oloclip smartphone lens brings fisheye and wide-angle views to your photos and videos. iHealth has health monitors you control with your phone. And iLock has an iris scanner for the PC that turns your gaze into the key that unlocks all your passwords. Bottom line, it's not about the phone anymore. It's about everything else your phone can control. For Nightly Business Report, I'm John Fort.
And finally tonight, some photographic proof that no matter where you may be in the U.S., continental U.S. that is, it is nearly impossible to escape the bone-rattling temperatures from the so-called polar vortex. Take a look at this satellite image from NASA showing that massive weather system covering what appears to be the entire eastern half of the nation, from Canada all the way down to central Florida, an Arctic blast that is almost out of this world, but very much here in this world tonight.
They say it's around most of the time, it's stable, but there's a crinkle that caused this.
A crinkle in the vortex.
That crinkle. That's Nightly Business Report for us. I'm Susie Garrett. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Tyler Matheson. Have a great polar vortex, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Nightly Business Report has been brought to you in part by
TheStreet.com. Up-to-the-minute stock market news and in-depth analysis. Our quant ratings service provides objective, independent ratings daily on over 4,300 stocks. Learn more at TheStreet.com/NBR.
I'm Susie Garrett with a Nightly Business Report news brief. Bitter cold temperatures in all 50 states, even Hawaii, shut down many companies, grounded planes, and caused power outages for thousands of homes and businesses. But that so-called polar vortex sent demand for natural gas to a record. On Wall Street today, stocks rose on news that the nation's trade deficit fell to the lowest level in 4 years. The Dow rose 105 points, the Nasdaq was up 39, and the S&P added 11 points. The Senate voted to limit debate on a bill to renew jobless benefits for more than 1 million people. A final vote is still pending. And government regulators fined 4 companies millions of dollars for using deceptive advertising to sell worthless weight loss products. Be sure to tune in to Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.